Everyone has this backwards. The moment tensions escalate, they buy gold first, or liquidate into cryptocurrency, or stuff cash in a safe. One threat, one solution, one catastrophic miscalculation. Here's the reality. The order you allocate matters more than what you allocate. What happens when banks freeze accounts before you can move funds? What happens when gold dealers stop buying because verification systems are down? What happens when your exchange suspends withdrawals? What happens when cash loses half its value overnight? Your diversified portfolio becomes worthless because you got the sequence wrong. Most investors realize they need hard assets at the same moment, creating a conversion bottleneck that traps wealth in the system. You won't execute trades. You won't withdraw funds. You won't convert paper to value. We're not building a portfolio. We're building a wealth preservation sequence that functions through multiple failure modes. Let's walk through this correctly, step by step. Before we allocate a single dollar, you need to understand the 4 commandments of survival capital. These aren't suggestions. These aren't portfolio optimization strategies for bull markets. These are the mathematical principles that separate those who preserve wealth from those who watch it evaporate. Miss one, and you're building a very expensive liability. Commandment 1. Liquidity hierarchy. This isn't about having cash available. This is about understanding that different assets convert to usable value at drastically different speeds. An asset that takes 3 weeks to liquidate might as well not exist when you need resources in 72 hours. Here's what most people don't understand. The sequence you build matters because each asset class operates on a different timeline. Immediate liquidity, short-term liquidity, medium-term store of value, long-term wealth preservation. You need all 4 layers. Most people build only 1 or 2 and wonder why their wealth becomes inaccessible exactly when they need it most. Commandment 2. No single government can seize, freeze, or devalue all your wealth simultaneously. When capital controls get implemented, when bank accounts get frozen, when currency restrictions appear overnight, you need wealth outside that jurisdiction's reach. One country, one failure point. That's not diversification. That's concentrated vulnerability. The mathematics are straightforward. Political risk isn't diversifiable within a single jurisdiction. You can own stocks, bonds, real estate, gold, all in one country, and lose access to everything with a single legislative act. Commandment 3. Failure mode independence. Each asset in your portfolio must protect against a different collapse scenario. This is where conventional diversification fails. Stocks and bonds both require functioning financial markets. They're correlated in systemic collapse. Cryptocurrency and electronic banking both require power grids and internet infrastructure. Correlated in infrastructure failure. You need assets that fail independently. When currency collapses, physical commodities hold value. When supply chains break, stored goods appreciate. When financial markets freeze, offshore allocated metals remain accessible. Different threats, different protections. Correlation is vulnerability. Commandment 4. Use value over exchange value. In a true crisis, paper claims become worthless. It doesn't matter what your brokerage statement says you own. What matters is what you can physically access and use. A stock certificate has exchange value only while markets function. A barrel of fuel has use value regardless. This is the difference between wealth that depends on institutional trust and wealth that depends on physics. When complexity collapses, when counterparty risk becomes existential, only assets with intrinsic utility survive the transition. Everything else is just numbers on a screen that stopped updating. These 4 commandments aren't theory. They're the proof that separates those who preserve wealth from those who watch it evaporate. Now, let's stress test this against reality, starting with the first domino that falls in every major conflict. Pop quiz. You have $50,000 in savings. War breaks out in 72 hours. Where do you put it? Most people say gold. Buy physical gold immediately, right? Wrong. The banks are overwhelmed. The dealers have lines around the block. The electronic verification systems that authenticate bullion are intermittent. You're standing in line with cash while the currency devalues by the hour. By the time you acquire the metal, You've lost 30% to panic premiums and currency erosion. Others say Bitcoin. Transfer everything to crypto before capital controls hit. Also wrong. The exchanges implement withdrawal limits within hours. The power grid becomes unreliable. Your hardware wallet is secure, but you can't convert it to food because the merchant payment networks are down. You have digital wealth you cannot access. Some say cash. Pull everything from the bank and hold physical currency. Closer, but still incomplete. You pulled $50,000 on Friday. By Monday, that currency lost half its purchasing power through emergency inflation. You have paper that's worth less every hour you hold it. Here's the timing trap. The asset that's perfect for month 3 of the crisis will trap you in week 1. Gold is excellent long-term wealth preservation, but it has terrible liquidity in the first 72 hours of panic. Everyone realizes simultaneously they need hard assets. The conversion bottleneck destroys you. Here's the location trap. You put everything in domestic assets, even smart ones. Stocks, bonds, real estate, gold in a local vault. The government implements capital controls. Everything inside the jurisdiction gets frozen. You diversified across asset classes, but not across jurisdictions. Single point of failure. Here's the correlation trap. You own what financial advisors call a diversified portfolio. 60% stocks, 40% bonds. When systemic crisis hits, both collapse together. They require the same infrastructure: functioning markets, clearing houses, electronic settlement, institutional trust. When that infrastructure fails, your diversification is revealed as correlated exposure. You thought you had 2 assets. You had one bet on the continuation of financial complexity. Here's the paper trap. Your brokerage account shows $50,000. Your bank account shows $50,000. Your crypto wallet shows $50,000. All 3 are digital claims that require functioning infrastructure to access. Power grids, internet connectivity, institutional solvency. When infrastructure becomes intermittent, your 3 diversified positions become 3 versions of the same vulnerability. The correct answer is there is no single correct answer. There's a sequence. So let's walk through this correctly. Step by step, dollar by dollar. Starting with the first threat that destroys most people's wealth before they even know the war started. The first domino. Your currency becomes worthless overnight. Not gradually. Not with warning. Overnight. Here's how fast monetary collapse actually moves. Friday afternoon, the banking system is operational. ATMs work. Wire transfers clear. Your account balance means something. Saturday morning, the government announces emergency capital controls. Daily withdrawal limits drop to $500. International transfers are frozen pending review. By Saturday evening, the currency has lost 30% of its purchasing power as panic spreads. Sunday, the banks don't open. Monday, when they finally do, the lines stretch for blocks, and your $100,000 retirement account is now effectively $40,000, accessible at $500 per day. This is the velocity of monetary collapse. It doesn't wait for your decision-making process. Here's the frozen account trap. Modern banking is entirely digital. Your wealth exists as numbers in a database. The government doesn't need to physically confiscate anything. They just change the database permissions. You wake up to find your account is temporarily restricted pending verification. That verification process takes weeks. Your wealth didn't disappear. You just can't access it. The distinction is meaningless when you need to buy supplies today. Capital controls are policy tools governments implement instantly during crisis. Cyprus, 2013. Greece, 2015. Argentina, multiple times. Lebanon, 2019. One day, your money is yours. The next day, it's trapped inside a jurisdiction that's treating capital flight as a national security threat. If 100% of your liquid wealth is in domestic accounts, you have a single point of failure. Here's the digital vulnerability. Your bank account, your brokerage account, your retirement account, all electronic. All require functioning clearing systems, working internet, reliable power, and institutional solvency. When war disrupts infrastructure, those systems become intermittent. Your wealth exists, but the network that lets you access it doesn't. You can't withdraw. You can't transfer. You can't convert to anything tangible. So, here's the conversion bottleneck that destroys most people. Everyone realizes simultaneously they need hard assets. The dealers get overwhelmed. Premiums spike to 40%, 50% above spot price, because demand is infinite and supply is constrained. You're trying to convert paper to metal while everyone else is trying to do the same thing. The bottleneck traps your wealth in the monetary system during the exact window when that system is collapsing. This is not hypothetical. Weimar Germany, 1923. Zimbabwe, 2008. Venezuela, 2016. The mechanics repeat. Currency devaluation accelerates faster than people can convert to hard assets. By the time you act, most of your purchasing power is already gone. So, how do you protect your wealth when the currency system collapses? 3 moves, in this exact order. Miss the sequence, and you fail anyway. Step 1. Before anything else. Emergency. Liquidity position. Allocate 10 to 15% to physical cash in your direct possession. Not in a bank. Not in a safe deposit box. In your possession. Multiple currencies. US dollars, euros, Swiss francs, small denominations. 20s, 10s, 5s. When ATMs stop working, when banks close, when electronic payments go offline, this buys you the first 72 hours. The math is straightforward. In acute crisis, nothing else moves fast enough. Offshore accounts take time to access. Metals take time to convert. Physical cash works immediately. Limitation. Inflation erodes this position. Currency collapse means your cash loses value daily. But that's acceptable. This isn't wealth preservation. It's tactical positioning. It buys you time while everyone else is trapped trying to access frozen accounts. Step 2. Offshore. Hard currency account. Allocate 15 to 20% to a bank account in a stable foreign jurisdiction. Singapore. Switzerland. Held in a hard currency. Swiss francs or Singapore dollars. This is your escape hatch from domestic capital controls. When your government freezes domestic accounts, this remains accessible. Establishing this requires action now. Most offshore banks require in-person verification, minimum deposits of $10,000 to $50,000, and documentation of fund sources. The setup window closes fast once tensions escalate. The function is jurisdiction diversification. Your domestic accounts can be frozen with a single policy decision. Your offshore account operates under different laws, different government, different regulatory framework. No single point of failure. Limitation. This still requires functioning banking infrastructure. If the international system collapses entirely, electronic access fails. But that's lower probability than domestic capital controls, which happen in nearly every major conflict. Step 3. Monetary metals. Allocated and offshore. Allocate 20 to 25% to physical gold and silver stored in a secure vault outside your jurisdiction. Critical distinction. Allocated, not pooled. Allocated means specific bars or coins with serial numbers assigned to you. When crisis hits, pooled claims can be disputed. Allocated ownership is unambiguous. Storage location matters. Not in your country. Zurich, Singapore, London. Forms that work. Gold sovereigns. 1-ounce rounds. Recognized international bullion. Pre-1965 U.S. silver coins for smaller transactions. Why this protects you. When currency collapses, gold and silver preserve purchasing power. A 1-ounce gold coin buys approximately the same basket of goods across centuries. Limitation. Low liquidity in the first 72 hours. Dealers may not be operating. Authentication systems may be offline. This isn't immediate crisis capital. This is medium-term wealth preservation. Running total. 45 to 60%. Allocated. You've built defense against monetary collapse. But currency failure isn't the only threat. The second domino. The supply chains break. Your currency still works. Your bank account is accessible. Your offshore gold is secure. None of it matters. The shelves are empty. Here's the complexity trap. Modern supply chains require three things simultaneously: just-in-time logistics with minimal inventory buffers, cheap, reliable energy for transportation, political stability across international borders. Any major conflict breaks all three at once. The system doesn't degrade gracefully. It collapses in cascading failures. Here's how fast this moves. Day 1, fuel prices spike as strategic reserves get redirected to military operations. Day 3, trucking companies reduce routes due to cost and driver availability. Day 7, grocery stores that normally restock twice daily start seeing gaps. Day 14, rationing begins. Not government-imposed rationing initially, store-imposed purchase limits as they try to manage demand against dwindling supply. Here's the hoarding cascade. Once shortages become visible, rational actors start stockpiling. This creates artificial scarcity even when production hasn't fully collapsed. The perception of shortage becomes the shortage. Your neighbors buy 6 months of canned goods. Now you're competing for what remains. The shelves empty not because the food doesn't exist, but because everyone took more than they needed simultaneously. Here's the violence threshold. When basic necessities become scarce, civilization becomes optional. Fuel stations see armed confrontations. Grocery stores require security. Pharmacies get looted for antibiotics and pain medication. This isn't society collapsing. This is society making a calculated decision that survival justifies force. Here's the monetary paradox that destroys wealth. Your gold preserved its purchasing power perfectly. 1 ounce still represents the same economic value it always has. But there's nothing to purchase. The dealer isn't buying because he has no customers. The store isn't selling because they have no inventory. Your wealth is intact on paper. Your ability to convert wealth to survival resources is zero. This is where financial preparation becomes insufficient. Money, even hard money, only functions when goods and services remain available for exchange. What preserves wealth when wealth can't buy survival? So, how do you position your capital when supply chains fail? Step 4. Strategic commodity stockpiles. Allocate 10 to 15% to physical commodities with immediate utility. Stabilized fuel in proper containers. Medical supplies, including antibiotics and trauma equipment. Shelf-stable food with rotation systems. Defensive ammunition in standard calibers. These aren't purchases. They're investments with use value. When scarcity hits, these appreciate faster than financial assets. A barrel of fuel becomes worth 10 times its cost when stations are empty. These function as both utility and barter currency. Limitation requires physical security, subject to degradation and expiration. You're trading financial liquidity for physical utility. That trade makes sense when financial liquidity becomes worthless. Step 5. High utility, durable equipment. Allocate 5 to 10% to tools that generate ongoing value. Quality hand tools. Water filtration with replacement parts. Solar power with maintenance supplies. Communications. Equipment independent of cellular networks. Why this works. These assets appreciate when production stops. A water filter becomes irreplaceable when manufacturing halts. Solar panels provide power value daily, regardless of grid status. These aren't consumables. They're capital equipment producing utility over years. Limitation. Requires knowledge to use. Vulnerable to theft. This isn't passive wealth preservation. This is active capability building. Step 6. Productive land in strategic location. Allocate 10 to 15% to arable land with water access, not recreational property, productive agricultural land in low population regions, outside primary target zones, with legal property rights. Selection criteria. Distance from cities, minimum 100 miles. Independent water source. Sufficient growing season. Jurisdiction with property law tradition. Why this protects wealth. Land produces food independent of external systems. It retains value across regime changes because all governments need agricultural production. Limitation. Not liquid. Requires active management. Vulnerable to property tax, though less so in rural jurisdictions. Running total. 70 to 90% allocated. You're positioned for monetary collapse and supply chain failure. But WW3 isn't a crisis. It's a condition. What happens when this becomes the new normal for years? The third domino doesn't fall. It grinds. WW3 won't end in a year. It will reshape the world order for your lifetime. The supply chains won't fully restore. The financial system will operate at permanently reduced efficiency. Political boundaries will remain contested for decades. Most people prepare for the disaster. Nobody prepares for the aftermath. Here's the grinding reality. No singular collapse moment. Just permanent reduction in stability, complexity, and institutional trust. This isn't a crisis you survive and then return to normal. This becomes the normal. The global system that supported 8 billion people in relative comfort doesn't come back. What replaces it is smaller, meaner, more fragmented. Here's what this means for capital allocation. The defensive positions you built, steps 1 through 6, those keep you alive through the acute crisis. They preserve wealth through monetary collapse and supply breakdown. But preservation isn't growth. Surviving isn't thriving. If this becomes a multi-decade condition, you need more than defense. Here's the opportunity window. Major conflicts destroy capital and create massive scarcity. Those who preserved resources during collapse can acquire productive assets at historic discounts from those who didn't. Land sells for pennies on pre-war values. Equipment gets abandoned. Businesses fail, and their infrastructure becomes available. Every major war creates this dynamic. The aftermath of World War II built generational wealth for those who had capital when Reconstruction began. The Syrian civil war created opportunities for positioned external actors. Economic dislocation is tragedy for the unprepared and opportunity for those who maintained resources. Here's the generational question. What preserves and grows wealth across decades of reduced stability and complexity? The answer isn't more gold. It isn't more commodities. Those preserve, they don't create. You need assets that generate value in low-complexity environments. You need capability that operates independent of institutional support. Here's the psychological reality nobody discusses. Living in constant crisis readiness is exhausting. The mental burden of maintaining defensive positions for years breaks most people. This is the cost of preparation. You're not just allocating capital. You're accepting a lifestyle built around permanent vigilance. That burden is real. The first 6 steps keep you alive. The final 2 steps position you to rebuild. So what do you invest in for the long war? 2 final allocations. These aren't about surviving the crisis. They're about owning the future. Step 7. Knowledge, capital, and portable skills. Allocate 5 to 10% to education and training that transfers across jurisdictions. Technical certifications in fields that remain valuable when complexity collapses. Medical skills, surgical training, emergency medicine, engineering expertise, mechanical repair, electrical systems, agricultural knowledge, soil management, water systems, language acquisition for regions you might relocate to, professional credentials recognized internationally. Why this is the ultimate inflation-proof asset. Knowledge can't be seized by governments. It can't be devalued by monetary policy. It can't be destroyed by infrastructure failure. When institutional complexity collapses and credentialed expertise becomes scarce, capability inflates in value. A surgical skill or mechanical expertise generates income anywhere, regardless of political conditions or currency stability. How to invest this allocation? Focused professional training programs, technical certifications from recognized international bodies, language immersion courses, apprenticeships in manual trades. This requires time investment now, not just capital deployment. Limitation. Requires sustained personal effort. Can't be liquidated for immediate cash. Takes months or years to develop. But when everything else fails, when your accounts are frozen and your gold is hard to convert, capability is currency. Step 8. Mobility and access assets. Allocate 5 to 10% to optionality and movement capability. Valid passports with maximum remaining validity. Renewed proactively. Backup residency or citizenship pathways in stable jurisdictions through investment programs or ancestral claims. Well-maintained, reliable transportation suitable for long-distance evacuation. Encrypted digital backups of all critical documents, credentials, account information, stored in multiple jurisdictions. Physical copies in waterproof containers. Why this matters? Optionality is survival. The ability to relocate rapidly when local conditions deteriorate. Multiple jurisdictional footholds mean you're never trapped in a single political system. When one country implements capital controls or travel restrictions, you have alternatives. The complete allocation synthesis. Steps 1 through 3. Monetary defense against currency collapse, 45 to 60%. Steps 4 through 6. Physical security against supply breakdown, 30 to 40%. Steps 7 through 8. Long-term positioning for multi-decade instability, 10 to 20%. Exact percentages vary based on personal risk tolerance, expected timeline, and current location. The integration principle. These 8 steps work together, not in isolation. Each protects against different failure modes that emerge on different timelines. Currency collapse happens in days. Supply breakdown happens in weeks. Long-term opportunity windows open over years. The sequence matters because preparation out of order fails. The harsh truth. This allocation won't make you wealthy. It will keep you positioned and functional when others aren't. That's the goal. Survival first. Opportunity second. You can invest the way you wish tensions would resolve, or you can invest for what's actually coming. Just don't take too long deciding. Geopolitical windows close faster than portfolio rebalancing schedules.